Hi, everybody. um, this is Kelsey from Ita Wines. I'm here at the winery dealing with some last-minute computer language that I do not understand, which is pretty much my job now that everything's online. So I did want to give everyone just a little peek at our tasting room because no one has been able to visit since we've opened. So I'm actually going to go outside and then bring you in with me. So here we go. I feel like I should be holding my phone, but I'm just walking around with the laptop. So here we are in beautiful Walla Walla. It's a nice sunny day. Wheat fields behind me. And then our little, incubator space. Can you even see that? Do not know how this works. There we go. So that's what it looks like from the outside, little kind of like chicken coop looking building, I guess. Is that a flattering way to say it? Then you just come on in. I love blue. I don't know if anyone could notice that. So lots of blue paint in my life. And our little tasting room, all dressed up. No one's here. And our tasting bar here. So this is where I'm going to be talking to you all for the next, I don't know. We'll see how long this takes. We'll see if I get questions or anything like that. So I thought I would just start with a little really basic primer on where the heck are we? I know a lot of people, we've got someone from Tacoma, yay, haven't necessarily been to Washington State, don't even know that grapes are grown in Washington State, but they are, and they are mostly grown on the eastern side of the state. So the climate here is quite a bit different than it is, than it is in Western Washington. So it's a lot drier. Walla Walla is famous for wheat production, sweet onions, things like that, and also grapevines. So we're on the eastern side of the Cascade Mountains, and within eastern Washington, Walla Walla is almost in Oregon, and it's just a really pretty little fertile valley. And at Ita Wines, we decided to just focus really minutely on wines from the eastern foothills of this valley. So we figured let's just go deep with where we're from, basically, and see what we can cook up. So, well, welcome. Let's talk about what we've cooked up here. I'm a little nervous, but maybe some wine will help me with that. So I want to start with two wines here. I have made two Semillons. This way. And I didn't really want to lead the witness in terms of like what you should think about it. I'm a big believer in letting people taste wine for themselves. And here we are doing virtual tastings, and that's pretty much what I'm going to be doing anyway. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Semillon as a grape because it's one that you don't usually see bottled on its own. And people might not be as familiar with it as perhaps Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay. Originally, Semillon is from the Bordeaux region of France, as is Sauvignon Blanc, which is why you often see them blended together. It is a white grape. It is known for having thin skins and rather large berries. And it's what you call a neutral grape, which means that it is not aromatic. So there are some grapes that have very strong odor compounds, like a Riesling has a lot of, it's called terpenes. In a Sauvignon Blanc, they have a lot of thiols, and they create kind of these delicate aromas, but they can also be very floral or depending what kind of soap you use, some people might think they smell soapy or a little bit piney or something like that. So aromatic grapes have kind of a very strong thing they want to say on their own. And I chose Semillon because it it doesn't have that, actually. Not that it doesn't have lovely things to say. It has some really nice fruit. It can be kind of zesty and limey and lemony to apple and pear. But my husband, who is my director, is giving me a note that I should encourage people to type in questions. So if you do have a question, just let me know. I'm happy to answer. That's why I'm here. So Semillon is a grape that you can kind of play with a little bit more and see how it expresses itself if you treat it differently during the winemaking process. And so that was one of the reasons that I chose it. So I'm going to pour some of each of them, and then I'll talk about what is the same about these two wines and what is different. So, little branded cork there. All about the details. So I'm going to have the one in my left glass. I'm reminding myself as well as all of you. And then number 2 in the right glass. So these grapes were both picked, well, they're both from the same vineyard, which is called Les Collines Vineyard. Got corks rolling off the table here. And Les Collines means the foothills. So they're from a vineyard that's kind of just tucked up. We have the Blue Mountains on the eastern side of the valley. And anyway, so they're from a vineyard there. They're from different blocks. One's a little further up the hill than the other, but they ripened very similarly this year. They were picked on the same day, and the chemistry was very similar. So when you decide to pick a grape, you're doing it based on flavor, but you're also doing it, based on kind of chemistry and what that will tell you about your finished wine. So before you choose to pick grapes, you're out there, you're sampling, you're tasting them, but you're also then collecting as close to a representative sample as you could ever hope to, and then processing that juice and testing that juice. And the things that you test for here, generally, that I've learned, every region is a little different with the way they like to do it, and every winemaker is different. But you test Brix, which is an approximation of how much sugar is in the juice, which will tell you how much alcohol you will get in the end, and pH and titratable acidity, which basically means how sour does it taste. So when all of those are kind of in the right balance, then you decide to pick. So these pretty much had the same Brix, a little bit more on number 2, but very, very slightly. And the pH and titratable acidity were also very similar when we harvested these grapes. So then what happened? Why are they different after that if they are from the same vineyard and the juice was pretty much almost exactly the same? So number 1 was taken back to the winery, put into a press, pressed gently, and then its juice got put into a stainless steel tank. And then we inoculated and fermented in that stainless steel tank. The number 2 was pressed, and then its juice was transferred to neutral French oak barrels for fermentation and aging. So during fermentation, stainless steel is actually kind of a tougher environment. Yeast like to have texture to grab onto. And a stainless steel tank, it's just smooth and slippery. And so sometimes those fermentations go a little bit slower. But they also, they're crisp and zippy. In the end, they're not taking on any flavors from that stainless steel. Versus in a barrel, a fermentation is kind of it's like a coral reef, kind of. It's got a lot of nooks and crannies. There are places for that yeast to make its little yeast babies and eat sugar and make alcohol for us. So it kind of does change the dynamics of the fermentation itself. If I'm getting too wine sciencey, did you use the same yeast for both wines too? Native. I did use the same yeast for the both of them. I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's a secret. But we did not go native. We made our wines at a custom crush facility last year. So native fermentation, for those of you who don't know what that is, if you don't eat and breathe wine like me, it means that you do not add a yeast strain that has been isolated and cultivated by a lab. And it's hard to do when you're in a facility with a lot of other winemakers who are using their yeast that they like. Yeast is airborne. It can just hop right into your fermentation, even if you wanted to go native. So that is certainly something that I would love to do in the future. And hopefully when we make our wine here, we just didn't have any equipment this last year, so we made it at another winery. It's something that can be really interesting to do. So anyway, fermentation happens. Your yeast have eaten all of the sugar and turned it into alcohol. One of these is in barrels and one of these is in stainless steel. Then what happens? There were a couple of different things that happened afterwards. So there is a secondary fermentation process that happens to most red wines in the world, I would say the vast majority of red wines, and some whites, but not all. And that's called malolactic fermentation. And in grapes, there are two acids. One is malic acid and the other is tartaric acid. Malic acid is the same acid that you get in apples. So it has like a really crisp, snappy, think of like a Granny Smith apple. That is what malic acid tastes like. Tartaric acid is actually only found in grapes, wine grapes, and tamarind, which is kind of cool. I'm sorry, Mike Stewart has a bad connection. But what can happen is there are these little bacteria that can eat malic acid and turn it into lactic acid, which is what makes, it's a softer acid, but it's the same acid in butter. So if you have a really buttery Chardonnay, that's what's happening. But different strains of that bacteria create different flavors. So you can choose one. I don't like my wine to taste like buttered popcorn. Some people do. You can choose a strain that creates certain characteristics. Anyway, so number 2, Mr. Barrel, Mrs. Barrel, barrel person, barrel wine, did go through this secondary fermentation. So it softens the acid and the way it feels in your mouth, and it also makes your wine more stable. So to make a wine stable, you basically take all of the food out of it. So sugar is a food. Lots of things can eat sugar. And you don't necessarily want everything to be able to eat your sugar. It will make weird smells and tastes. So you want to make sure that the right thing eats the sugar in your juice to make your alcohol. And then if you want to, the only other food that's going to be left is going to be the malic acid. And so if you go through ML, it pretty much means there's no more food in your wine, which means that then you can get away without filtering your wine. And so this wine was not filtered because it didn't have any more food in it. But I wanted to keep some of that crisp green apple character for number 1. And so I did not go through ML. And this wine was sterile filtered so that then something funky wouldn't happen in the bottle and it would be spritzy and smell weird and things like that. So wanted to make sure they were both stable. Yeah. So now that you know the story of these two, I'm going to smell and taste, and I'm not usually in like normal times, but we are not in normal times. I am a very private and kind of nervous taster. And so here I go. I'm going to have to get over that. So this one, I mean, to me, I know it. So I'm like, oh, it tastes like Semillon. But it definitely has a nice kind of lime zest character to it. I get like a Meyer lemon. And it has a little bit of a brininess to it. This wine has always reminded me of like being at the beach and like getting hit by a little bit of sea spray, which can be positive and negative depending on how cold it is. So it has lots of that, just snappy. I just always think of this wine as just like snappy. So now I'm going to smell number 2. Is number 2 bottled on the lees? Oh, that's a great question. It does smell rounder. It smells more like apple. It smells more like an apple pie, I would say, which brings us back to that lees question. So lees are dead yeast. And for the Semillon, what we did was after fermentation was over, all of the yeast sinks to the bottom. And you can do something called a bâtonnage, which is a really fun French word to say, which just means you take like this propeller looking thing and you put it in the barrel and you stir up those lees and you bring them into contact with the rest of the wine. So we did this about once or twice a week for a month or 2 after fermentation was over. And what that does is it gives a little more body to the wine. It just makes it so you can kind of create like longer chains of flavor compounds. It like sticks them together. But it also gives your wine more of the flavor of that yeast. So if you ever have a wine that smells like brioche bread or an apple pie or something like that, that can come from that contact with the dead yeast, because that's what yeast tastes like and smells like. So with number 2, you also get more of these kind of really lovely, it smells a lot like a really lovely apple pie to me right now. I'm just imagining like walking into my grandparents' house and smelling an apple pie in the oven. So that's what that is smelling like to me. Versus this one just smells like limeade, kind of. So it was not bottled on the lees for number 2, because then it would be very hazy in the bottle. So we racked it. So we let everything settle to the bottom and then took the clear wine off and left the lees behind after it was aged. So that's the difference there. So I'm actually going to taste these and try and talk about that. So this wine definitely is zippy. It's linear, I would say. It's not super generous. This is a wine that I actually made for my palate. I love acidity. When I was a bartender, I would always have my drink sent back because they were too sour. And so and a lot of my wine friends love super acidic wine. And so this is kind of the wine I made for people like me. And it also is, for me, kind of a quintessential like picnic wine or to have with oysters. So it has this really nice zippy acidity that pairs well with other things that are bright and bright and zippy. So not a huge body. It's a light-bodied wine. It's an acid-driven wine. It's wine I want to drink with friends. But every wine is wine I want to drink with friends, if we're being real. I've got so many questions. Well, I'm going to finish tasting this, and then I will answer a question from John. So with number 2, you definitely still get acidity, but it feels bigger in your mouth. It feels more viscous. It's a great tasting word. I don't know if that sounds delicious or not. But I also get some of that creaminess, a slight creaminess to it that comes from that malolactic fermentation. So I would say those are kind of the notes on these 2. So exact same grape, exact same day, and these are the different flavors you can get just from different winemaking styles. And not even being super crazy, just barrel, stainless, malolactic, and not. So I'm going to take a little break from talking about these because I have a question from John here in Walla Walla. Okay, wait, I have another. John, I'm going to get to you. But Terry, my dear father-in-law, is asking, how long do you feel these whites can be kept in the cellar? Most white wine is not built to age for a super long time. Part of that is because they don't have any tannins in them, which are what make one of the compounds that makes red wines red, and they are an antioxidant. So they don't have that level of protection that red wines do. But another thing that contributes to the ageability of a wine is its level of acid. It helps, the lower the pH, the more microbially stable it is. And both of these have a really nice acidic backbone. So these, I would say, you could keep for 3 to 5 years. I mean, they taste good now, but I think they would still taste fresh and interesting. They will become more complex as they get older. You get more just different flavors. You know, wine is alive, so it changes as it ages. You can definitely push it. Some people like drinking older wine. It can become oxidized, so the color will turn darker for white wines as it becomes oxidized, and then you get different flavors. They can become kind of nutty over time. And if you like those flavors, then it could be worth holding on to wine for longer. But if you like really kind of fresh fruit flavors, those tend to change as wine gets older and become more baked or like a dried fruit. I'm getting text messages right now. I apologize. So I'm going to go back to a question from, my husband will answer my text messages for me. I'm going to go back to John's question, which is about winemaking and why did I decide to get into winemaking, and what do I like most about it? I decided to get into winemaking. Well, I moved to Walla Walla in 2016 because my family had bought some property here, and I moved here because I thought I wanted to be a farmer, and I like being outside all the time, and I like drinking wine. And so maybe I could be good at growing grapes and making wine. So I moved here, and I mean, started working at a winery. I started working at Balboa Winery here in town and worked a harvest there. And working your first harvest is like total insanity, because I thought I knew something about wine. Like, you know, it's like grapes, barrels, bottles. And then you get to your first harvest and you're like, oh my gosh, wait, what? So the first step is, you know, you get the grapes in, and then they go through this crazy machine called a crusher destemmer that like throws stems out one side and drops berries down the other. And it has these like crushing roller bars. And, you know, in the wine press, there are a bunch of different types of wine presses that do different things in different ways. And then with red wines, you have maceration and all of this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, the steps, like between grapes and barrel, like it's a lot of work there. Anyway, so once I worked my first harvest, I was kind of hooked. It's a really lovely process to be a part of, and just the smells during harvest of all of the fermenting wine and the tasting juice out of a wine press. It's that really hooks me on it. And what do I love most about it? Honestly, one of the things I love most about winemaking and grape growing is that I don't have to be in front of a computer all the time. And so it's been kind of ironic to have to be in front of a computer all the time with what's going on in the world. But I think that most people right now are just doing what they need to do to stay safe, and we don't always get to do our favorite thing right now. But I am looking forward to one day actually being able to talk to other people about my wine and not just talk to my new best friend, my computer, about wine all the time. So yeah, that's the answer to that question. Stuart is saying that I got into wine in Bulgaria, which is true. I did drink a lot of wine when I spent a summer in Bulgaria. So it takes practice. You know, the first thing you have to do if you want to get into a career in wine is start drinking wine. So I'm going to move on to our rosé. And I do want to make a quick note that I did also make red wines in 2019, but they are still in barrel. They're still sleeping the sweet slumber of an aging wine. Let's see. Hold on. I have another, the most attractive angle for me, I'm sure. What other types of wine do you plan to make in the future, and how did you choose them? From Bocas in New York. So I have my 2 Semillons and my rosé, which I will talk about in just a moment. And I also made 3 red wines this past year. So one of them is a Pinot Noir from a vineyard called Breezy Slope, which is just a little further uphill from the vineyard Les Collines, where this wine was sourced and very close to my family's property. So I tried to source from as close to my family's property as possible. And I chose Pinot Noir because we have it planted in my family's test plot, and it's been one of my favorite wines to make from the grapes in the test plot. So I thought it'd be really interesting. It's really hard to find Pinot Noir here in Walla Walla. It's generally too hot in the bowl of the valley versus up in the foothills. You can grow some grapes that would otherwise kind of be too cooked here. So I bought some Pinot Noir from there. And then I made a Bordeaux style red blend, mostly Merlot with a bit of Petit Verdot blended in. I think Merlot makes a really elegant red wine. It's a little bit softer. There are a lot of people making Bordeaux blends here in Walla Walla, and there are a lot of people that are like making the most powerful tannic. And so I feel like that's already on the market. Like, people are doing an awesome job at that. But that's not necessarily what I love to drink. You know, on a special occasion, yes, give me a big fat ass cab with my steak for sure. But most nights aren't a special occasion for me, and I don't eat a lot of red meat. So I kind of made wine for my lifestyle. And then the last one that I made is a Syrah, also from Les Collines Vineyard. Because honestly, I was just lucky to be able to get my hands on it. The viticulturist there, Brad, was like, hey, I have a ton of Syrah from this really awesome block. It sells out every year. He asked if I wanted it. And I said, yeah, because it's one of the premier Syrah vineyards in Washington State. So those are the reds that will be coming out. I think under the Ita label, we do want to keep the number of wines that we're making fairly limited, just because it can get to be really overwhelming, I think, as a consumer as well as a winemaker, to just make anything because you can. I would rather really focus and make a few things and really be able to give them a lot of attention. So, but in the future, we'll plant at my family's farm and have everything come from that estate. So we're still in the process of figuring out what does well there. Release dates for red wines. So our Pinot Noir will be bottled later this summer, and we are hoping to release that this fall. So Pinot Noir has softer tannins and things like that, so it can be released a little bit younger, was our thought for that. And then the other 2 reds, the Bordeaux style blend and the Syrah, will be released in 2021. Okay, I'm going to take a look at this. When do we get it? Oh, okay. Do you have food pairings you would recommend with the Semillons? Great question. So with Semillon number 1, I definitely, I took inspiration for this one from just that feeling of like being at a beach, at a picnic on a beach, and it being kind of cold. And so I think of like fresh oysters, really any fresh seafood, things that, with such an acidic wine, you could also eat fatty food. That sounds kind of crazy, but the acid helps cut the fat. So if you're having like fried chicken or something, it can be really good with that, because you have this balance of your mouth is coated in fat, and the acidity kind of helps cut through that and refresh your palate between bites of your KFC or whatever it is you might be having. So with wine pairing, you can either go kind of same, so other acidic, fresh, bright foods, or you can go opposite, usually. So a really rich, kind of fattier thing. With Number 2, this to me is like the wine I want to drink while eating chicken piccata, which is one of my favorite things to eat in the world. So it can stand up to, white meat, mushroom-based dishes, things like that, or just by itself, I would say. So that's where I would go. That's kind of the like family of flavors I would go with number 2. Okay, let's see. Am I caught up on questions? Nicole Albro, my cousin. Do you enjoy the time in the field, harvest, or post-harvest production? I would say I enjoy it all. It's kind of nice to have a seasonality to your work and to have nature tell you what to do, because I hate making decisions. But if nature is saying like, oh, it's time for you to pull leaves in your little test plot, it's time to sample grapes, it's time to pick grapes, you're like, okay, I don't have to decide. It's telling me what to do. But there is, and harvest is so exciting, but there is just like a beautiful moment when harvest is over, because you've been working so hard and you can finally just rest and wash all of your clothes and do all of that. So, you're really ready for a long winter's nap once harvest is over, which you wouldn't normally be. It's just a nice seasonality to it. By the time winter's over, you're really ready to get back out and check on the vines and get back to work after you've been resting. So it's a nice little cycle. So I am going to, figuring out computers here. I'm going to talk about our rosé next. Rosé in general. Okay, I'm going to start like global, and then we'll go more specific. So rosé is basically a wine made from red grapes that is processed like a white wine, kind of. But it is always made from red grapes. You will never get a rosé made from a white grape. So there are a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can say you're picking Merlot for a red wine. You would bring your grapes to the cellar. You would process them through your destemmer and let them macerate. And so you picked them for the red wine, which means you let them get riper. And then you would bleed off some of that juice and make rosé with it. And people do that for various reasons. They like to concentrate the number of berry skins to juice ratio, things like that. And it's a completely valid way of making rosé. I tend to prefer rosés that are not made in that way. But there's no wrong answer. Do you. So the other way that you can make rosé is that you pick earlier than you would for a red wine. So when you're sampling, you're looking for less sugar and more acid. So you'll have less alcohol in the end, and you'll make kind of a crisper, brighter wine than you would for a red wine. So you pick your grapes, then some people just take those red grapes and put them into a wine press and press them. And the juice can be a very pale, almost white color because it hasn't had any time to interact with the skins. Or what I did is you can take those grapes and you can take them off of their stems and crush them so that you have kind of a juice berry soup. And allow that to sit for a little while. And while it sits, some of those, the juice becomes darker over time as the skins of the berries color the juice. So that's how we made this one. I made it from a grape called Primitivo, which is a clone of Zinfandel. Clones are kind of like a weird thing. It's basically like twins-ish that express different traits differently. So genetically, they're almost exactly the same. Primitivo is considered to ripen a little more evenly and earlier, which is one of the reasons why it was good for rosé, because you're picking it earlier than you would for a red wine anyway. And sometimes, like Zinfandel, you can have a cluster that will still have green berries and red berries at the same time. And so it's kind of hard to get even ripeness there. So when you're picking earlier, it's good to have more even ripeness earlier. But I chose it because for me in rosé, I like acidity. So I knew that Primitivo has nice acid when you pick it early, and fruit, just nice fruit character to it. So it was left on the skins for 6 hours, and then it was pressed, and the juice was fermented in stainless steel. So it was fermented after the maceration period. It was treated very, very similarly to Semillon number 1. So fermented in stainless steel, and then it did not go through the malolactic fermentation. So this one was also filtered before going into bottle. I have notes. Let's see if I've talked about things. Yeah, that's it. Now I'm going to taste it. I think I'm getting all of these right. Okay. I have this theory that when people smell rosé, they like to say that it only smells like things that are also pink. But it's hard not to fall into that trap. To me, this definitely kind of smells like a mountain strawberry, a little bit of red currant. You know, you can smell that it's not a white wine. You know, it has those red fruit flavors, which you would really almost never get in a white wine. So, but really pretty and bright, and a little bit floral, very slightly. I just had a question from New York City. Does Ito Winery have a vineyard dog or cat? Yes, he's featured on our website. Loki, Ito Mary. He's not here right now. Technically, you're not supposed to have dogs in wineries in Washington State. Kind of a bummer, but a lot of people do, but we do not. So rosé, nice and pretty. That's nice. Has a really zippy acidity. Like I said, I love acid. For me, it has this quality. Not only like do I enjoy the way that it tastes, it makes me want to drink more wine. So yeah, just really nice, bright and refreshing. This one, you know, you could definitely pair it with, I don't know, grilled watermelon salad with feta. Sounds really good. Oh, here's a picture of my dog. That's Loki. He's scruffy. Yeah, or just sitting on your porch. You know, all wine pairs well with sitting on a porch, I think, these days. So yeah, so that's the 3. If you have any other questions about these, specifically about winemaking, I hope I didn't bog you down too much in winemaking details. It's certainly something I could talk about all day. John is asking, which varietal did I find most intimidating and why? I was not super intimidated by the Semillon because I had made garage Semillon from my family's grapes. We have a row of Semillon in the test plot. So I felt like, okay, I know this guy. I know what you're about. I understand you. But I had never made a rosé before on my own. I had certainly worked at wineries where we made lots of rosé and participated in that process. But when I have made my garage wines, it's certainly a mini scale, but you're making every single decision and realizing that, oh my gosh, you're just making a decision every day, all the time about everything. And so I was a little bit worried about how it would turn out. And I was also really worried about the color. Not that all my winemaking friends will say, like, color doesn't matter. It matters how it tastes. And that's true, but people really like pink wine. And so I was worried about the color, especially because the color compounds in Zinfandel are kind of notorious, or Primitivo, for it looks really great when it comes out of the press. You know, you'll taste the juice and it'll be like beautiful salmon pink. And then during fermentation and filtration, it just goes away and you have a white wine. And so some people will add a little bit of red wine to their rosé to make the color more pink. But we decided not to do that. We're like, if this is who this guy is, then gal. I don't like using gendered pronouns with wine, but sometimes I do it accidentally because, you know, grapes are, they've got it all, you know. But this one, we did not add any red wine to, and it has gotten to be a more pink color as time goes by. Just after calming down, after bottling, it kind of gets roughed up during the bottling process. So yeah, its color has deepened. I'm like, oh my gosh, is it too pink? Maybe we shouldn't have stayed on the skins for so long, but I think it tastes really good, and that in the end is really what matters. So yeah. Any other questions from the peanut gallery? Is everybody this isn't a Zoom, so I'm having a hard time. I hope people are staying safe. I hope people are enjoying drinking wine or tea or whatever it is that you have, whatever's getting you through this. Oh, Marty says, are you taking us on a tour? I did a tour at the beginning, but I can do another tour because I know a lot of folks have jumped in the middle. I'm going to just take a quick sip of rosé before I do that. So the tasting room is pretty much done. So I'm out at the airport district of Walla Walla. So it's like, if you've ever flown to Walla Walla, we're very close to there. And there are these 5 incubators that are owned by the Port of Walla Walla. And they are specifically for new wineries. So we have one of those, and I've painted a lot of things. You know, it's a rental, and the layout isn't necessarily what you would put together if you were designing a winery and tasting room, but the rent is really good. So I'll kind of do a reverse tour. I'm on my laptop, so I apologize if I am pointing it in bad places. So this is our little tasting bar. I did lots of DIY in here, well, because Mama's on a budget. So these were old bookcases that I put butcher blocks on top of. We have a little seating area over here. I've got some cushions being made as well. And I'm only going to show you the parts of the winery that aren't a huge mess right now. So this is our entryway. So you walk in, you see a nice little display, and then you head over to the tasting bar, or hopefully someone will one day. And going outside, it's a nice day. So we got the red one, which I'm kind of glad we have the red one. I can see how dirty my computer screen is. So it kind of it looks like a big barn type of deal. Oh my gosh, why is this so difficult? So there's my little sawn I just finished doing. And yeah, we'll be putting together some landscaping and some outdoor seating. We've just kind of put a lot of that on hold right now because no one's coming here, and outdoor furniture is expensive. Like, you can tell I've lived in cities until I moved here, because I was like, what? This is highway robbery. And then wheat fields right there. So lots of big blue skies, all of my neighbors. So, yeah. But I wish you all were here. I wish I could talk to you, not just talk to myself. So, yeah. If anyone has any questions they didn't get a chance to ask me, or any pointers, I'm doing another one next week, and man, just getting it started was a little bit of an uphill battle. So yeah, just drop me a line. I'm the only one who works here. So if you email Ita Wines, I am the one who answers it. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. And just thank you all so much for tuning in and hearing me prattle on about this. It's been cool, a little weird, but lovely, and lovely to see who all came out. Anyway, cheers. I'm going to stop talking and start drinking more of this rosé. So, all right, love to you all. Stay safe out there.